Hi everyone, I'm here with Mr. Peter Horbury. He's the Geely's Auto Design's Vice President, and he's here with us to talk a little bit about concept cars. The first question I have to ask you, Mr. Horbury, is what's the purpose of a concept car? What's the importance of it?
Well, the purposes are varied. Sometimes you're more or less experimenting in public with a brand new concept, brand new idea to see what people think. Other times we're closer to production and we want to make maybe some final tuning to the design, and we more or less say, look, this is a precursor to what is coming, what do you think? It's all to do with, in some ways it's showing off, but in other ways it's a serious research for our future.
And what do the design must comply throughout the development of the car? I mean, do aesthetics is more relevant than consumption, for instance?
Everything's important and everything's a compromise. We don't have a completely free hand to design every shape that we'd ever wish, because certain restraints come into play. I mean, people aren't getting smaller, so we can't make cars too low. They've got to accommodate the growing population or growing in size, and so there's the interior space, and then that goes against the aerodynamics, because the smaller the car, the better aerodynamics, and therefore the better the fuel consumption. So these two are fighting each other, and the rule book on safety regulations alone would design a car, because the headlamps have to be in a certain position, the windscreen pillars have to be a certain thickness, certain position compared to the driver's eye position. All these things are set by law. So it's quite amazing to me that we can actually create cars which look in any way different. So that's the job. It's really steering through all those restrictions to create something which is still new and exciting for the customer.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because we have all these safety regulations that must be trouble for the design makers, to come up with an idea, that has to comply with everything and still has to be pretty, okay? It has to be beautiful. And yeah, would you say this is the main challenge for the design? I mean, to comply to the security regulations and still deliver a beautiful car.
It's true. It makes life much more interesting, let's say. A clean sheet of paper is easy, but I don't think anybody's ever had a clean sheet of paper. There's so many things that are already set. Let's say, if a car is what we call a facelift or a reskin, then underneath that shape, everything is the same as the last one. You can only move things a certain amount, but still you have to make it look different. So these restrictions come in different shapes and sizes. The safety regulations being one of the latest and most stringent, and the ones that make the biggest difference. For example, pedestrian safety. The fact that you have to have 55 millimeters between the surface of the engine hood and the next hard part beneath it has increased the size of front ends a huge amount over the last few years, but people sort of haven't noticed that they've been getting bigger and bigger because of these regulations.
And there is another challenge that I see, is to make a design of a car that is globally accepted. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because cars nowadays are getting even more global. And each market has its own questions, has its own priorities. And how do you deal with that?
Well, I think if you try to satisfy everybody with their own design demands and fashion, you would never make it. It would just be a bland, Mr. Average car. I think what is better to do is to say, well, we come from Germany, we come from Sweden, we come from France, and to create something which looks like it came from those places, because that makes something a lot more exotic, a lot more exciting. The difference between a car coming from the Latin countries, the Southern European or South American, which is much more playful, the Renaults, the Alfa Romeos, things like that, compared with the Germanic seriousness of Audis and Volkswagens, and the Scandinavian design from Volvo, and the Britishness of a Range Rover. I think that's the better way. You can't take everything into account. And my ambition is to make the Chinese designs reflect the culture of China, because there's 5,000 years of it. And if we can't find something exciting in 5,000 years of art history, architectural history, to bring into our designs, there's something wrong. So I look forward to that. And rather than try and satisfy everybody and end up with the lowest common denominator, to me, it's far more exciting to take the values of the culture you're in and sell that to the world.
So you have to make the Chinese cars beautiful and accepted to a lot of markets, but still you have to maintain its identity.
Yeah. I think that we have to be careful. I mean, there's no use. For example, I don't think we see a car with a pagoda roof from a Chinese house. But there are many forms in Chinese architecture which are easily translatable. I mean, in this car, on the top of the instrument panel, there's a curve which you only see on certain bridges in China, really historic bridges, a very long, slow sloping curve. Very beautiful and harmonious design, and that's easily translated into part of the car. So I see many opportunities to take China and make it palatable to the whole world.
And this is a characteristic that it is Chinese per se, but it is well accepted. I mean, these curves, this kind of smoothness in the car.
Too far, I think you can put the rest of the world off. I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't really think there is one now.
And the platform that you're trying to build for Geely is going to be influenced by Volvo, I mean, or it's going to be 50-50?
Yeah, the influences are in the unseen elements, although many of them will make a difference to the proportion of the car. We are making sure we accommodate all of Volvo's needs, all of Geely's needs in one platform. And platform is a sort of loose word for all the technology that's out of sight. But it does have an effect on the design because of certain dimensions. The safety dimension of the front for the crumple or crash zones have an impact on the way the car looks. But you can manage it. That's what we learned to do at Volvo, how to manage those extra dimensions. So, together with Geely and Volvo, we're getting the best of both worlds.
You still have a room to build a platform that is still variable, flexible.
The reason that was true is because in design we're working with the engineers to create the platform. We're not waiting for an envelope to fall through our letterbox with the platform in it, because then we'd have to draw around the engineers' dimensions. We work with them to make sure those dimensions are acceptable to us.
And one last question about the design, the creation of a car. What are the differences between a conventional one and an electric car? Because from the way I see, an electric car, you still have more room to create.
Well, the powertrain obviously takes up a certain amount of room, but so do the batteries. So space is at a premium just as much as it is with a conventional powertrain. And the other thing is, looking from the outside, I talked about the pedestrian protection. Those dimensions are still necessary. So the position of the windscreen compared with the front, the height of the front, compared with the bumper, all these things are regulated. So don't be surprised if an electric car looks very, very familiar over the next few years, because the same rules apply outside of just the powertrain difference.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Horbury. Bye-bye.